Welcome to the Utah Parent Center's presentation of reducing bullying using a multi-tiered system of supports. My name is Michelle Murphy, and I'm one of the parent consultants at the Utah Parent Center. My primary role is to work with families who live kind of in the Granite School District area, but I also work a little bit serving statewide families as well. If you have any questions for me or ever need to contact me, you'll see my phone number and email address up on the screen. So before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Parent Center, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Parent Center, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully you guys are mostly familiar with what the Utah Parent Center is, but basically we are a nonprofit that works statewide to serve parents who have kids with special needs. We've been around since 1984, so quite a while now. And kind of our motto is that it's by parents for parents of children with special needs. And our goal is to really help you help your children live productive lives as members of the community. The model that we use is called a parent helping parent model. And what that means is that mostly all of us here at the Parent Center are also parents of children and youth with special needs as well. And we believe that's a really great model because we can kind of relate to some of the challenges that you're experiencing as well. So with that said, these are some pictures of my two kids. I have two boys and they are ages 4 and 12. And really one of the biggest reasons that I got into this line of work is because my 12-year-old, you'll see him up there on the screen with his nice fancy dress suit on. He is what we call a twice exceptional student, and that means that he's really gifted, which is great, but he also has Asperger's syndrome, and they call kids that are gifted with a disability twice exceptional because they have exceptionalities in both directions. So he's really my motivation why I got involved in this field and why I do what I do. And bullying is something that's really personal to me. Having two boys, it's something that I have encountered in the past with my own children. I've also seen it be an issue for other members of my family as well. And I really believe that it's something important that we have to deal with at a school level and also at a family systems level. And together, hopefully, we can come up with some better ways to deal with bullying. Before we dive into what we can do to address bullying, we first have to understand the model of the multi-tiered systems of supports. This is a model that's being used statewide here in Utah. It's originated out of some other states, and other states that have used it have also found it to be very successful. So I'll give you kind of the technical definition, and then I will give you the non-technical definition. So the technical definition of what this model is, it's a coherent continuum of evidence-based system-wide practices to support a rapid response to academic and behavioral needs with frequent data-based monitoring for instructional design, making sure to empower each child to achieve high standards. So kind of in layman's terms, this is a system to support children that have various needs. Basically, it's a way to systematically look at a child and decide what they need and make sure they're getting the appropriate support no matter what their needs are. So this is a really positive shift here in Utah. This next slide kind of talks a little bit about the shift that this system is creating. So we used to kind of look at intervention. Once there was a problem with a student, we'd start to look at, okay, how are we going to address this problem? With this multi-tiered systems supports model, or MTSS, which is kind of the shorthand term that we call it, we're now looking a lot more at prevention. So we're not waiting till a student has a problem. We're saying, what can we do school-wide to really prevent kids from getting to the point that they need intervention? And that's really positive. That, the best way to deal with a problem is to work with it before it becomes a big problem. Another change that this is helping to create is that we've been using more and more assessments, and we've been able to kind of figure out which students need help, which has been a positive starting point, but now we need to move past that, and we need to not only know which students need help, but we need to figure out what each student needs to be successful on an individual basis. Different students respond to different things in different ways. So with the MTSS model, it is allowing us to, look at individual needs and figure out how to meet the needs of each student. Another shift that we're seeing is that we've in the past really focused on having programs available to serve kids, but now we're moving past that and we're looking at intentionally designing services and supports that really match the individual needs of a student. So, again, we're customizing what we're doing for each student to make sure it's effective for them. This next slide shows kind of a visual of what the MTSS model looks like. So you'll see that it's a triangular based model. MTSS doesn't just apply to academics, it also applies to behavior as well. So we can use this same model for a variety of different things. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to use the same model to apply to bullying prevention. But basically, as you'll see, there's kind of three levels on the model. The very bottom level, which is in the dark green, is what we do for all students. Now, this includes students with disabilities, and it also includes students without disabilities. So these are kind of the proactive and preventative things that schools are doing for both behavioral challenges and academics to hopefully prevent problems from happening. And this kind of prevention model works for about 80 to 90% of students. But sometimes we do have kids that don't respond to what's available to all students. So then you go up to kind of that next level, and you'll see that in the yellow, which is what we do for some students. And this is when we've done kind of all those preventative, we've given them a good base, and they're still not responding either behaviorally or academically. So now we're going to give them some more intensive supports. And typically you're looking at about 5 to 10% of students that need these more intensive supports. And these supports would be scientifically researched and they'd be based off the needs of the student. For some students, however, you're giving them that extra targeted support and the problem still isn't resolved. For whatever reason, they're not responding or they just need more intensive supports. And that's when you go to the very top, that kind of red-orange area. And these are students that require intensive interventions. And this is for about 1 to 8% of students. So these would be the situations where the student hasn't responded to previous interventions, so now you're going to give them some very intensive supports. Another important component of this process is all along the way, schools need to be using progress monitoring and data to figure out which level of intensity a student needs. So it's important for them to be tracking students individually to find out if what they're doing is working and if the student needs more or less support from there. So this is a really great model, and as I said earlier, can be applied to a lot of different areas. Now what we're going to do is talk about how we can apply this MTSS model specifically to bullying, and give you some ideas on each level, what kinds of interventions you could be looking at, both at school and at home. Okay, so as I just showed you, this is the MTSS model again, and what we're going to talk about first is Tier 1. So we're going to talk about what it is we can do for all students to help prevent bullying and take a real proactive approach. And I'm going to give you some ideas of what you can do at home as parents and also some ideas to bring back to the school about what they could be doing at that level. It's important to remember that these strategies need to be in place for all students. So whether your student has a disability or not, these are things that should be offered and available to them. Okay, so the first really important thing that needs to happen in bullying prevention is that we have to be sure that we're teaching our kids values. Now, some of the values that are really important to teach in terms of bullying are things like empathy, respect, and responsibility. If kids have these skills, they're less likely to be bullied, and they're also less likely to engage in bullying. So these are really important lessons that we can begin teaching our children at home from a really young age. And I know from personal experience that having these values really does help. One of my earliest memories in kindergarten is that I remember getting on a school bus one day and there was a kid standing in front of me who had some sort of physical disability, and he was having a really difficult time getting on the bus. He was kind of stumbling over the steps, and there were some kids that were sitting at the front of the bus who started teasing him, telling him he was stupid, why couldn't he walk, and they were laughing at him. And I remember even as a young child in kindergarten just feeling kind of outraged at these kids and how they were treating this boy. And I just knew deep inside that it was wrong. And I remember asking them, leave him alone. It's not his fault that he's has problems, quit teasing him. And, I don't attribute this to me being an extraordinary person or anything like that. I really attribute it to the fact that my mom taught me early on about empathy and respect. She taught me that it's not okay to treat other people that way, and that if I saw people being treated that way, it was my responsibility to intervene. Again, so these lessons that we teach our kids make a huge impact on how they respond to bullying. And if enough parents do this, we'll see a decrease in bullying. We're also seeing schools starting to understand that they need to support these values as well. Some kids, like my son with Asperger's, are not born innately understanding things like empathy or responsibility. And so I've had to teach him these very specific skills, and the schools had to help reinforce that as well. So when we're talking about kids with disabilities, we even have to be more intentional with teaching these things, and it's something that may be appropriate for the school to help support as well. Another really important thing to keep in mind is that kids in general model what they see from adults. So they model the behavior they see us as parents doing, they model the behavior they see other adults doing. And so modeling is very critical. And I think as parents, we're the most important model our kids will ever have. It certainly matters, other influences that they see as well, but we're the primary role model for our students. How we deal with other people, how we behave is critical in terms of what our kids are seeing and what they're learning. We, unfortunately, when you look at bullying, it's not just a problem that affects kids. There are lots of examples in the media, the internet, of adults engaging in bullying behavior as well. Now, as an adult that often uses a lot of blogs and kind of online forums, I've personally seen that cyberbullying is a very big problem even in the adult community. So, if we allow ourselves to engage in this kind of behavior, our kids are going to pick up on that. They listen to us about how we talk about other adults, how we deal with conflict we have with other adults, and so nobody's perfect, but we have to remember that we always have to kind of be aware that our kids are watching and listening even when we think they're not. So just keep that in mind that, modeling is a big component of bullying prevention. Another vital thing, and you'll see this kind of in every tier, is communication with our child and making sure that we have open communication with them. The first thing you want to do is always check in with your child often. Ask them how things are going at school. How are their relationships with their friends? What friends are they having a good relationship with? Are there any people that they're struggling with? So just kind of having that ongoing communication is really important. Also, being an askable parent is really important. An askable parent is just a parent that's approachable, that's open to talking about their kids, that doesn't react really strongly to something our kids are saying to us that might be a little bit negative. And you want to make sure that your child feels comfortable coming to you with difficult issues. So just kind of being open and available. Make sure that you talk to your child ongoing about what bullying is. There's a lot of information out there about bullying, but sometimes kids are confused what bullying is versus what normal childhood conflict is. They may have questions about, what to do if they encounter a bully or if they're being bullied. So, start those conversations young with your children about what bullying is, what it looks like, and how they can help prevent bullying. And the last suggestion we have is just to use natural teaching moments. Sometimes it's a little difficult when we sit down for kind of a formal talk with our kids. It gets a little intimidating, and especially when your kids kind of hit those teenage years, they don't always love to have those more serious kind of conversations with their parents. So one way to get around that is to use natural teaching moments. So as things happen, you kind of discuss it and integrate little lessons here and there versus having a long, drawn out, more serious conversation. So an example is to kind of use media. Especially teenagers, they're interested in what they see on TV, what they hear on the radio. And as you see examples of things, point them out to your kids. If you saw an example on a TV show of bullying, point that out. Oh, did you notice how that kid was bullying that other kid? And when you see examples of maybe kids standing up to bullying, you can point that out as well. Wow, it was really cool how that kid stood up to that other kid, or how he told someone when there was an issue. So, just kind of using the everyday situations to highlight information for your student about bullying or bullying prevention. There's also a lot of great resources out there you can use to get ideas about how to talk to your child, what to say to your child. One of the better resources is found on the PACER website, and you'll see the link there on the bottom in red. They have some publications about how to talk to your child about bullying. So if you want to get more information or kind of understand a little more about what to say, that would be a great resource to go to. Another really critical component is that schools need to have school-wide prevention programs for bullying. Now, there are many, many programs available out there that focus on this area. There are things like Second Step, there are curriculums based on reading materials, there are materials that schools can purchase. But I wanted to highlight one particular program that actually my son's school has used that I really like, and I think this is a simple enough approach that many schools could implement a similar thing. So what they're using is called the SWAT program, and basically what SWAT stands for, it's kind of a system of dealing with bullying, and the S stands for stop, the W stands for walk, and then the A and the T stand for and talk. So together it's stop, walk, and talk. And basically, if you are being bullied, the approach is that you would ask the bully to stop. If the bully doesn't stop, you walk away. And the talk means that you go and report the bullying to an adult. The same thing goes for the kids witnessing the bullying. They can also ask the bully to stop. If the bully doesn't stop, they can walk away, which means that the bully no longer has an audience. And then they can also report that bullying to a trusted adult as well. At my son's school, as I said, they do use the SWAT program, and it's kind of fun how they've done it. They call theirs the SWAT team, so it's kind of a cute play on words. And at the beginning of the year, the school police officer goes to all of the advisory classes and he talks about this stop, walk, and talk procedure. And then they invite all the kids to be part of the SWAT team. And if you're part of the SWAT team, it means that you agree to help stop bullying by stopping, walking, and talking, whether it's you being bullied or whether it's another student being bullied. And if you agree to be on the SWAT team, you actually sign a little contract saying that you'll agree to do these things on behalf of other students. And then they give them a little gummy bracelet that says SWAT team on it, so it's kind of a fun thing. But what it does is really create an environment that bullying isn't tolerated in, and then they reinforce these concepts throughout the year. Another great thing that I love about this particular method is that there's a whole free curriculum available for schools to use. There's no charge to use it. It has lesson plans, it has handouts, it tells you exactly how to go over these concepts, it includes activities, and you'll see on the bottom that link. It will take you directly to this program and you can read more about it. But even if you want to implement something like this or talk to your kids about it at home, the lessons that are available on there could be adapted for home use as well. So I really like this one, and I especially like that it's free. So this could be a good possibility for a school that maybe doesn't currently have anything set up. Other cool school ideas. There are lots of other things schools can do to kind of prevent bullying. One that a lot of Utah schools are using is called a buddy box, or some schools are calling it a bully box. But basically, it's an anonymous way for kids to report bullying. One of the issues with reporting bullying is that sometimes kids feel like they're going to be a snitch or a tattletale if they report bullying. So this just allows kids to report it in a way where no one will know that they were the one that reported it. The box is locked and there's little slips of paper. Students can report if they saw another student being bullied. They can also anonymously report if they're being bullied. And then usually the school social worker or school psychologist takes all the forms out of there and will follow up on anything that's reported from that box. So that's just one simple thing that schools can do. It doesn't really cost much money, and for some students is a good method. Another really cool idea that I've seen at several schools is schools that do a school poster campaign revolving around bullying. So basically they have all the students make posters that have anti-bullying messages on them, talk about being a positive bystander, all of those kinds of things. And they post them all over near the entrance of the school. So every time kids go in and out, they're seeing these posters. And it just really creates a nice climate and gives those students the visual reminder that bullying is not tolerated in that setting. It helps them think about bullying ongoing, and the students like it because they've got to create the posters and it's fun for them to see all the other kids' posters. Again, this is not something expensive. It's something that, kids could do in one day and you get them posted up on the walls. It's just a fun visual reminder about bullying. Another kind of interesting thing that's been proven to work with kids is to teach them kind of fun acronyms and review those daily. It's a good way to get ideas into their head and help keep it there. So, one of the acronyms that a lot of the schools are using, and you may have heard your kids talk about this before, is what they're calling KAIFUDI. And KAIFUDI stands for Keep Your Hands, Feet, and Objects to Yourself. And it's basically, just a fun acronym that they go over daily and they remind the kids, remember, we're going to keep our hands, feet, and objects to ourselves. And this is really targeting kind of physical aggression towards other kids. And, that so teachers can kind of go over that daily, give them that reminder. And when they see kids maybe getting out of hand, they remind them, remember KAIFUDI. And because they reviewed it daily, most of the kids know what that means and they're able to self-correct at that point. So that's just an easy, simple thing that you can do. And you can also use that in your home as well. I use that with my 4-year-old, and even he's able to understand that concept, and it's worked pretty well. Another critical component is to make sure that we're using positive behavioral curriculum and instruction. We spend a lot of time telling kids what they shouldn't do. No hitting, no pushing, no calling names. But sometimes we forget that we need to teach them what they should be doing as well. A lot of times, especially our youth and kids with disabilities, they don't always know what they should be doing. So we've got to give them some real direct instruction that focuses on the right things to do. So, we need to talk nice to our friends. We need to say kind words to people. And it's really good if you can focus on, positive friendship skills that kids need and really build that into the day as well. Another really important thing is to teach instructions explicitly and then reinforce those ongoing. This sounds really simple, but a lot of times kids don't know what the expectations are, or it's not broken down enough for them. And this is a really powerful tool that you can use in both school settings and in a home setting. So, probably about 5 years ago, because my husband's an educator, he was off during the summer. And at the time, he had my son with Asperger's, who was around 5. And he also was tending 2 other boys, 1 boy and 1 girl, and they also had disabilities as well. And all 3 of them kind of struggled with the behavioral side of things, being nice, that sort of thing. So what we did was we got a giant poster board and we wrote down all of the rules that we had, and we tried to keep them very simple and very direct. And because at the time all of these kids were around age 5, we also put some visuals on there with each rule so they could kind of see the rule as well. And then we posted it up on the wall of the playroom that they were using, and every single morning we would go over the expectations and rules. We'd have them all sit down, they'd all help read the rules, and then, anytime that we saw they were getting out of hand, we'd refer back, remember our rule, we need to use nice hands. And surprisingly, this worked really well and actually we hardly had any behavior problems that summer. And I think a lot of it was clearly stating the expectations and then reinforcing that. And when they were having good days, we'd be sure to give them a lot of praise and a lot of reinforcement for doing the right thing as well. So again, very simple, very easy, doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's very effective. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the role of a bystander. Now, this is a big terminology thing right now in bullying prevention, is teaching kids about bystanders. And basically there are 2 kinds of bystanders. There's hurtful bystanders and helpful bystanders. So hurtful bystanders are people that kind of instigate the bully to start. So these are the kids that sit by and kind of egg the bully on. Yeah, you should fight with them, or you should yell at him. They're encouraging the bullying behavior. Other kids encourage the bullying by simply laughing, cheering. These are the kids, fight, 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 that are standing around. And this is very stimulating for the bully because they're getting a lot of attention from their other peers when they're engaging in this activity. We also have some bystanders that once the bully starts, they actually join in. So someone's teasing someone else, and then other kids standing around actually join into the bullying. Lastly, we have some bystanders that don't really do anything. They don't encourage the bully, they don't cheer, they're not joining in, they're just kind of standing around. But we need to teach our kids that standing around watching bullying is part of the problem. When you do this, you're providing the bully with an audience, and when you're standing there silently, you're giving a seal of approval to that bully to continue with their hurtful behavior, and you're giving them a lot of attention. So it's important for our kids to understand that all of these behaviors is what's called being a hurtful bystander, and this is what we want to avoid doing. So what we want them to do is be a helpful or active bystander, and this means that they are discouraging the bully, defending the victim, redirecting the situation away from the bully. As bystanders, they can rally together to get support from other peers to get the bullying to stop. They can rally together to stand up against bullying, and also they can report bullying. So we want kids to understand that rather than just passively watching it, we want them to be an active and helpful bystander, and that they have the power to do that, and this is perhaps one of the most valuable ways that bullying can be reduced in a school setting. Another kind of fun acronym I ran across at one of the conferences I went to is called the Buster technique. And so you'll see in the red along the side each letter and what it stands for. So the B stands for befriending the victim. So if a student sees another student being bullied, one thing they can do is kind of befriend that victim. Students that are being bullied are very vulnerable to being lonely and those sorts of issues, and they need good friends. So one easy thing they can do is to become a friend to that person. The U is to use a distraction. So sometimes when a kid is being bullied, a bystander can kind of create a distraction to get the student out of that situation. So for example, if you noticed another student being bullied in the hall, a student could say, "Oh, come on, Johnny, we need to go back to class. It's time to go back." Or, "Oh, it looks like recess is over." Kind of creating a distraction to get away from the bullying situation. Another option is to speak up and stand up. That means that they're telling the bully, "Can you please stop? Can you leave him alone? It's not nice to bully him," those sorts of things. So they're standing up for the person being bullied. The T is for tell or text for help. I really like they included the texting because that's kind of a popular way for kids to communicate now. But basically the concept that they can ask for help. The texting is nice because they could quietly text somebody and then that adult could know to come over and help them. The E stands for exit alone or with others. Again, that just means leaving, taking the student and leaving the situation. And then R is giving a reason or a remedy. They might be able to say to the bully, "Hey, if you don't stop that, you might get in trouble." That's giving a reason. Or giving a remedy might be like, "Let's go talk to the teacher and see if we can figure this out." Or "Let's go talk to the recess duty and see if they can help us figure it out." Maybe they're fighting over something or fighting about a situation. So any of these strategies can be really helpful. And if you can kind of teach them these strategies and then teach them the acronym that goes with it, it will help it to stay in their mind a little bit better. This next slide is going to show you a video by Dateline, and it's a really nice video. It was done by Dateline, and they kind of have some hidden cameras set up so that they can observe students and how they respond to a bullying situation. So I will let you watch this video, and then we'll talk about it a little more.
Surviving the perils of parenting. And what about dealing with a bully?
Because I don't want to see her. I want her to sit over there.
It's our first test tonight. Here's how we did it. We set up a casting call for a fake reality TV show called Generation Gap, and these two girls think they're here to try out.
Hi, my name is Sarah. Hi, my name is Jacqueline. I love to have adventures in my backyard. I love ice cream.
Their parents are in on this unscientific test, allowing us to see how their kids will react when another child is being bullied.
You have to hit it. You said you were good at this game.
It's an important illustration. Parenting expert Michelle Borba, who wrote The Big Book of Parenting Solutions, says teaching the kids who witness bullying may be the key to solving this growing problem.
On a school campus, we know there's about 85% of kids who are called bystanders. They're the ones who are watching
And what kind of power do they have?
They have tremendous power. They're the missing link, the silent majority that we can turn this whole school campus around by teaching them how to step in, still be safe. Your whole campus culture will change.
We'll see if these bystander kids know what to do when they witness what looks like a helpless girl being verbally abused. We've brought them into a room filled with hidden cameras and, unbeknownst to them, 3 actresses. We hired one to play the bully,
I love to sing.
one to be her accomplice,
Hi, my name is Sandy.
and one more to act like a victim.
I love to play softball.
All 5 girls appear to be trying out for Generation Gap, but once we leave them alone, our 3 actresses will go to work.
I get number 1. Which one is number 1? I get it.
The mothers of the other 2 agreed to let us do this because they want to shine a light on bullying. They're in a room down the hall, watching the girls as the hidden cameras roll.
She's like very friendly.
Sarah's mom has taught her daughter to steer clear of school bullies. Another thing they could have tried, befriending the victim, which our expert Borba says can sometimes be just as effective as standing up to the bully. She role-plays with them how to do it.
Be mean as you were, and this time, watch what she does.
You're a loser.
Perfect. Stop. You don't have to say anything, but I want you to at least start walking a little closer over to this girl. You can either stand next to her, or you can put your arm around her. You can do something quiet. Okay? And look at the smile on her face already.
Let's try it again. We escort our next group of kids into the room wired with hidden cameras.
You need to go through the game.
But this time the actors we hired are boys, a bully, his helper, and a victim. Again, the other 3 kids think they're here to try out for a reality TV show.
I'm Alex. And my name is Jessica. I'm Lucy.
Their parents will be watching what they do. Like all the other parents, Alex's mom says they talk about bullying, but usually only when it comes up.
It's definitely an issue in the school. They try to educate the kids about it.
Jessica was the target of bullying when she switched schools last year.
That must have been really hard as a mom. It was terrible. It was truly terrible.
Will Jessica's first-hand experience make her more likely to step up?
Hopefully she will try to support whoever is being bullied because she's been there.
And what about this girl, Lucy? She just won her school's 8th grade character award given to the student who's most likely to lend a helping hand.
She is really outgoing, very kind to everybody she meets.
Still, as much as this dad thinks he knows his daughter's heart, he's curious to see her in action when she has no idea she's being watched.
I think she's probably going to go to the person being bullied and kind of get him out of the situation. And I'd be surprised if she didn't do something. So this is going to be interesting.
Again, the group is instructed to play video games to prepare for the reality show competition. Our actor bully jumps right in.
Do you have the way? I find I spend too much of my time on Facebook.
But the bully has barely gotten a word in, just one snide comment that the victim is no good at this video game, when Lucy fires back.
You're playing. Come on. Who's next?
It's not good.
Don't be mean.
I'm not going to be mean.
In fact, just as her dad predicted, Lucy quickly befriends our victim.
Come on, we're going to win this, Max.
I love her. I love her.
Don't be mean.
And over, she firmly stands up to the bully.
I mean, is he bad at this or is he...
Okay, stop with it. Stop. You're being annoying.
I'm not making fun of him. I'm just saying the fact that he's not going to win.
That's rude. You shouldn't be saying that about people.
What's more, she tries to reason with the bully while showing concern for the victim's feelings.
You see how you're getting your feelings hurt? Like, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but like, seriously,
I mean-
I'm one to stand up for people, and if you were getting picked on, I would stand up for you. You're getting your feelings.
She's amazing.
Lucy's performance has an effect on the group. Watch how it gives Jessica the confidence to step in.
Stop being mean to people.
Stop being mean.
You are being mean.
She's covering his mouth.
Because of one child activating it, the other one steps in, and that's how you mobilize it.
Lucy stepped in there and got in his face, right?
She's still doing it.
And when our producer returns, Lucy doesn't hesitate to tell an adult exactly what's been going on.
He's getting made fun of, and it's not. I'm trying to stick up for him, and he's screaming at me.
Before she gets too mad, we break the news that the bullying was just an act.
So these guys are actors, and you actually like each other. You want to give each other a hug.
Lucy, kind to the end, even apologizes to our actor.
Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine.
So, how do we teach our children to be more like the kids we've met tonight? Borba says the most important thing is to set a good example.
By the way, it's the average kid who doesn't step in. And when we go, well, it's also the average adult who doesn't step in.
And start talking about bullying with your kids before it starts.
I do think you did a wonderful job.
When they're young, way before middle school. We reunite the families from both groups, a proud parenting moment. And when Lucy is met by her dad, she's overcome with emotion.
I am so incredibly proud of the way you stood up for Max. You did, it just comes so naturally to you.
Sorry.
Oh, don't cry, baby.
No, I just felt so bad. I'm just so happy that that wasn't real.
And we're all happy that she's showing kids it's okay to do the right thing.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this video. It's one of my favorite videos dealing with bullying, and I just love how, when that girl stands up to the bully, the effect that it has on the other kids. You'll notice in the video that she's able to get the support of the other kids, and by just one kid standing up, it gives the other kids the courage to stand up as well. This video is a really great tool. I've actually showed it to my kids as well. And I just love the message of how it shows the power that a bystander can have and how much influence a bystander really does have on the situation. If you're interested, there are also some other videos by Dateline as well that kind of deal with similar studies, and time again it shows that the bystanders really do influence the other kids. So if you're interested, just go on YouTube and type in Dateline bullying videos and you'll see a bunch of them pop up. Okay, so we've kind of talked a little bit about what should happen universally for all students to prevent bullying and those proactive things you can do. But sometimes, despite having all those things in place, there are still some students that are going to be bullied, and that's when we move up to Tier 2, some students. And at this level, we're really going to start to give some more targeted interventions to the student that continues to be bullied, even though we've implemented all of these proactive approaches. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do as a parent, if you feel that your student is being bullied despite the things that are already being done, is you kind of have to become a detective. The first thing you want to do is talk to your child with the intent of gathering some real specifics about what's going on. So you'll want to ask them things like what happened, where did it happen, how often does it happen, who's involved, where is it happening, and what happened. And these details are going to help you figure out, sort of an action plan that you can do. Now, sometimes, especially when we're talking about teens, they're not always very forthcoming with us when we try to get these details. And I know there's been times when I've tried to approach my son and I get the classic, I don't know, answer from him. So sometimes it's necessary to also work with the school a little bit to see if they can assist you in getting some of those details. The school may need to talk to your student, and they also may need to talk to some of the other students or other people that witness these things to get more details about what's going on. So it's okay to go to the school and ask them for their help if you're not really able to get a clear picture on what's happening. Another really critical thing is to begin to keep a written log of events. And this becomes important, if the bullying turns into more of a long-term thing, or just to have a history of who's been involved with the bullying. So just get a little notebook and start writing down every time your child reports bullying, and write down as many of those details that you can get as well. The next thing you want to do if your student's being bullied is you want to enlist the help of your school. Schools can be really important allies in bullying prevention and dealing with bullying when it's happening, but you have to be willing to go in and start that communication with them. So I always recommend your first point of contact to be a social worker or psychologist, just because they're going to be the ones in the school that have the most expertise on bullying and behavioral issues and social skills, that sort of thing. So you can make an appointment with them and just begin to discuss the issues that you're seeing and work with them to kind of create a plan of action, what they can do to help support your student. One of the best things that schools can do is really teaching targeted social skills, both to the student who's being bullied and also to the student who's doing the bullying. These social skills could be reinforced by the classroom teacher and also by the school social worker or psychologist. For the student being bullied, they would need to work with them on things like what to do when they're being bullied, teach them how to make positive friendships with other kids, help them understand how to report bullying. For the student that is engaging in the bullying, they would also need to work with that student on their social skills, how to replace their negative behaviors with some more positive things, ways that they can deal with frustration and anger. So there's kind of work with both students that needs to be done that the school can help support. Another way the school can help is to kind of keep an extra eye on your child. So if the bullying's happening consistently in a certain setting, like in a certain class or with a certain teacher, you can talk to that teacher to say, hey, can you kind of keep an eye on my student, because he's reporting that he's having issues with this other student. The teacher may need to do things like maybe have those two students seated away from each other to reduce things. She may need to talk with her class a little bit more on bullying, why it's wrong, how we handle conflict, all of those sorts of things. So you can definitely work with your school staff on implementing some things to help the situation improve. You can also ask your school for their school bullying plan. Every school in the state of Utah is required to have a bullying plan, and this is a written plan that outlines how the school will respond to bullying. So it will list out like what kinds of consequences they look at, how they handle reports of bullying, how they investigate bullying, all of those kinds of things. So it's helpful to have that. So as a parent, you're kind of comfortable and confident with what the school should be doing. And lastly, it's really important to have a person that your student trusts that they can go to when they're being bullied. Now, sometimes we run into problems where a student reports bullying and the person they go to doesn't really take it very seriously or tells them, oh, well, you'll just have to deal with it or ignore it or things like that that really aren't helpful to the student. So talk to your school and figure out who is a person that can be responsive to your student, that your student trusts and they can build a relationship with, and that they can go to when they're being bullied. And I really prefer to have that person be a consistent person so that they're building a relationship with them, so that that person knows the history, they know what's happened previously, and they're comfortable working with your child. And it's really powerful to have someone, that your student feels is an ally to them. So set up that safe person and get that relationship going so that they have someone at school that they can go to. Another critical thing that I think is a really good idea when your student's being bullied is to really encourage self-advocacy and help them create what's called a student action plan. Now, this action plan is actually available for free on the PACER website that we've been discussing throughout this presentation. And so you can download it and print it out. And basically, it's a 3-step process that you go through with your student. So step 1 is thinking about the bullying. You're going to have the student describe the situation, have them describe where it happened, who was involved, what happened, how it made them feel. So they're kind of identifying the problem in step 1. Then step 2 is thinking about how the situation could be different. So what would they like to see happen? How could things be changed? What kinds of things would help them feel better about the situation? And then step 3 is to think about the steps needed to make those changes happen. So think about what is it the student needs to do, what other people need to be involved, and what could those people do to help. So you'll have the student kind of fill that out. The really nice thing about this is that this just isn't for kids that are being bullied. It could also be for the kid engaging in the bullying. So they could talk about, what's happening with the bullying, when have they done it. Then they could talk about what could make the situation different, and then they could talk about what kinds of things could help them change and what kind of supports they need. So this is really applicable to various kinds of situations. So what I want to do is read you an example of how this might sound filled out. So we'll start with Kayla. She's a 10-year-old girl with Tourette syndrome, and she has a classmate that's making fun of one of her tics. And basically, tics are behaviors that happen kind of involuntarily, and they're really repetitive. So in step 1, Kayla's going to talk about what's happening, and she's going to give as much details as possible. So here's what Kayla says in step 1 of her plan. She says, "There are times when I blink my eyes, not just some, but a lot, especially when I feel stressed. When it happens, there's this kid named Jordan that intimidates me. and he makes a big production out of it. He aggravates blinking and then tells all his buddies to watch him, and then all the kids start laughing. It really hurts and makes me wish I didn't have to go to school. So you can see she's kind of describing the problem. Now, step 2, she's going to describe what she wants done about it. So she writes, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I just want him to stop. It's hard when it feels like people are laughing at me because it's something I can't control. I want to say something to him, but it won't be easy to do. I wish maybe one of the other kids could stick up for me. Maybe I could talk to some of my friends and see if they'd support me when this happens. I think it might be helpful if I explain my blinking eyes is just part of who I am. Okay, so that was her step 2. Step 3, she's going to talk about what steps she can take. So she says, I'm going to talk with my mom and ask her for ideas of the best way to tell the other kids about my tic. I'm going to ask her if we can go to my teacher together and let her know what's happening. My friend Carla is someone who's always on my side. I'm going to ask her if I can talk to her anytime I'm really feeling bad. And when I feel ready, I want to practice talking to Jordan. But in the meantime, I'm going to remember that there are a lot of people that care about me. So again, you can see how she's kind of worked through this problem, and she's identified the supports that can help her. So this is a really positive way to help your child feel involved in the process and help them feel like there's some resolution to the situation. Some points to remember about the bully themselves. We spend a lot of time, we think about the victim, but there's also the other student involved who's doing the bullying. And one important thing to remember is that bullying is a behavior, not a characteristic. It's something that a student is doing, but it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It means that they're engaging in an inappropriate behavior. Another thing to just consider is that bullies are really suffering oftentimes as much as the victim. Now, at one of the conferences I recently went to, there was a gal who was severely bullied as a child, and she recounted an experience that she had with these other 2 girls who severely bullied her to the point that they were using rocks and they were actually cutting her face with it. It was very serious bullying. So the school, began to work with these 2 girls that had engaged in that bullying situation and trying to figure out what it was that was driving them to so severely, bully another student. And it turns out that, in the process of working with these other 2 students, one of the students revealed that she had actually recently been involved with a very serious domestic dispute at her house, where her dad had actually pulled a gun on her mom. And so this bullying was kind of a manifestation of the pain she was experiencing from this personal issue that she was having. And once they were able to identify that, they were really able to more effectively help her deal with some of those things in different ways. We have to remember that we have to deal with bullies with compassion and caring as well. They're kids too. A lot of times they're even kids with disabilities. So we have to remember that they may not know the skills needed, and we have to be willing to teach them what they should do. We have to model it, we have to talk to them about it, and we have to reinforce that. So, on this tier 2 level, you're not only going to be working with the student and individualizing things for them, you're also going to be working with the bully and individualizing things for that child as well. So with that, we're going to move up to tier 3. So we've talked about what we do for all students. We've talked about what we do for those students who what we're doing for all students isn't working, and we're going to give them some targeted interventions. But there are situations where the bullying just continues on, or when the bullying is so severe, it requires really intensive intervention. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that intensive intervention looks like and how we can deal with bullying at this very top level when it just becomes really severe. Again, the first thing you're going to want to do is talk with your child. When bullying is really repetitive or when it's really serious in nature, expect that your child's going to be really emotional. It's hard, especially for our teenage kids, to admit that they're being bullied and that it's something that they can't handle. You'll probably want to talk to them in a real private setting, because it is an emotional topic. And it's also something that's really emotional for us as parents. When our kids are being continually bullied, it wears on us too. So be prepared that it's normal for you to feel emotional. It's normal to feel a little angry. It's normal to feel upset that your child is being targeted. and try to deal with that beforehand so that, you can remain as calm as possible when you're talking with your child. But just understand it is an emotional thing when a student's being bullied. Sometimes it's hard to know what we should say to our student when they're reporting this kind of bullying, when it's, been happening or when it's severe. And so these recommendations come from Jody Blanco, which is the gal I was telling you about earlier that was seriously bullied as a child. And she's now a consultant and travels around nationwide doing bullying prevention training and working with students in schools. And she says one of the big problems she had when she was a youth is that adults would always sit her down and say, "Oh, I know how you feel. I was bullied when I was a child." And that this was really offensive to her, and she never responded well to that kind of approach. And she said that in her work, working with other students being bullied, that typically that's not a strategy that works. So she suggests saying, "I don't know how you feel, but I can imagine that it must be really awful." So you're giving them that kind of empathetic feedback, but you're not claiming that you know how they feel. You're not them. You don't know exactly how they feel. Then she suggests that you follow that up with some sort of statement. She suggests, let's talk about some actions we can take together today to help you solve this challenge that you're facing. Now, two important things about this statement. The first thing is that you need to help them feel like you're dealing with the bullying right away. Kids don't have a great sense of time, and telling them we'll meet with your teacher in a week or we'll work on this and talk to the principal seems like really far in the distance for them. So they need to know that you're taking them seriously right now. You're going to discuss what can happen right now. The other thing is to call it a challenge. A challenge sounds like something that's difficult, but something that can be resolved. And we want to give them hope that we can resolve this issue. We don't want them to feel hopeless, like there's nothing that can be done. So by phrasing it as a challenge, you're kind of leaving it open that it's something that can be resolved. She also has some ideas about what to do. So first you have that conversation with them. You let them know that you're going to come up with some ideas about what to do. She says that one of the biggest things that leads to teens that hurt themselves or hurt other people because of bullying is the isolation and loneliness that those kids are feeling. And when kids are being severely bullied or when the bullying has been ongoing, they really desperately need to develop some positive relationships with other peers. So she suggests that you immediately contact libraries, park and recs, community education, other types of social or recreational activities that your child is interested in, and get them involved with something right away. And she also suggests that you find something kind of outside of your neighborhood so the student can start with a fresh group of peers. And the goal of this is to really start them having some positive social relationships, because if a student has some positive social relationships, that can kind of counteract some of the negative relationships that they may have encountered. And I know from firsthand experience that this can be a very, very powerful tool, and that having a positive relationship really can counteract some of the negatives a student might be experiencing. When I was a child, I was actually homeschooled through 9th grade. And so I was, kind of a target for bullying because I was different than the other kids. And pretty much one of the only social experiences I had was attending the church that we belonged to. And when I would go, I remember groups of girls, when I'd come by, actually getting up and all walking away because they didn't want to sit by me. And I had to endure some pretty relentless teasing. But the one thing that kind of got me through it was that I had one friend. I had one person I knew liked me and one person that I knew I could go to. And I often wonder, how horrible it must be for kids that don't even have that one person. And I can see that it would be very isolating. So do whatever you can to help them build positive relationships with a group or even just with another individual. The second step is to kind of share your plan with the school. Talk to your child about it, then go to the school, say this is what we're doing outside of school. And when you talk to the social worker, she suggests saying something like, my child's really been encountering some challenges with her classmates, and I just want to sit down with you and discuss some possible solutions to this problem. So again, you're phrasing it as a challenge. you're being proactive, you're going to the school, you're saying, let's work together, but we need to figure out some possible solutions to this. And then together with the school, you would brainstorm some things that you could do. Another component when bullying is becoming more severe and the other things haven't worked is that you need to start reporting bullying to the school. Now, we recommend that you report the bullying in writing, and that's just because it's the most clear form of communication and you've got that paper trail. So there actually is a template you can download from that same Pacer website, and it's kind of a fill-in-the-blank thing where it gives you some of the words and you customize it to your child's situation. But basically, you're going to report, your information, the details of the bullying, where it happened, when it happened, and you're going to give it to the school. And what I like is that it directs the school to please investigate the problem and then get back to you within a week and let you know what they're planning to do. So it's kind of nice because it gives them the expectation that you expect them to handle the situation. Okay, some tips for reporting. First of all, you always want to follow the chain of command. You don't want to take your letter directly to the superintendent if you haven't worked with the school first. So you always want to start with the school, and you want to talk to the right people. So if it's happening in a particular setting, like in a classroom, you'd want to start with that classroom teacher and give her the report. If it's happening kind of sporadically throughout the day, then go to the school social worker or school psychologist or school principal. Make sure that they have, copies of it and that you've saved copies of the report yourself. And always set up a follow-up meeting with the school. So if you're meeting and you're kind of implementing a plan, set up a time maybe 2 weeks later to meet again and review to see if the plan is working, if the problem has been resolved, or if there's still other things that you need to do. And be sure to bring in your previous log you've been keeping at home just to show them more about the history, who's been involved, help them understand the situation a little bit better. So what are the school's duties once you report? Basically, their duty is to immediately investigate and determine what happened in the situation. The investigation may include talking to your student, talking to other students, talking to other adults that might be involved. If they reveal that there was bullying or harassment that took place, then they need to take reasonable steps to end that bullying or harassment. They need to make sure they eliminate any hostile environments that might exist. They have to have a plan to keep it from reoccurring. And they also have to make sure they have a plan to deal with any potential retaliation of the student who is being bullied or the students or person that reported the bullying. So there's a lot of things for the school to do, but my experience has been that schools are getting better at doing this, and many schools are starting to take bullying much more seriously than they did in previous years. I was recently out at one of the high schools, and I heard a teacher talking about an incident that happened with a student. This girl was eating lunch, and she had just been given some Pokemon game figurines from another friend, and a girl she didn't know walked over, took her figurines off of the table, and actually threw them out the school window into the bushes. So luckily, this student did have a really good teacher that she went to report to, and this teacher, bless her heart, actually went outside the school, searched through the bushes with the student till she found all the figurines. Then she immediately started an investigation because the student who was bullied wasn't sure who these girls were. So she went and she talked to other students. She gathered information about who these students were so that she could, make sure that these other students were talked to as well. So it's really good to see that this is happening in the schools and see this teacher's example of that she did take it seriously and she worked hard to make sure that there was a plan of action. They also adjusted her lunch so that she was sitting closer to the lunch duty, and that way that person could help supervise to make sure that this didn't happen again. So they were able to not only deal with the situation, but they were also able to come up with a plan of action as well. So again, the school does have a responsibility to deal with the bullying. Sometimes it's necessary to implement what's called a safety plan. This is for students who don't feel safe coming to school or there's been repeated issues, and so there needs to be more supervision for them. So the plan can include things like extra supervision. That means having them around an adult more often, or like in the example I gave you, the student eating lunch, close to the duty where she could be supervised. Sometimes students need escorts, someone that goes with them class to class if the bullying is happening in the hallway. Some students have escorts maybe even to and from the bus if the bullying's happening outside of the school. Some students will do a daily check-in because sometimes they're reluctant to report the bullying, so someone needs to check in with them daily to see how it's going, if there was any issues that day. Separation of students is sometimes needed, so that means intentionally keeping two students from having interactions. So making sure they have separate lunches or separate classes, or they're not sitting by each other. And then also getting the support of peers, intentionally talking to other peers about helping the student if they're in a bullying situation, having peers be the escorts and, agreeing to help make sure that the student is safe. Again, most of these things aren't needed permanently, but you may need them temporarily while you're dealing with a situation until the student feels comfortable and feels safe again in that setting. So don't be afraid to ask for some of these things if you feel that that would be necessary for your student to have a positive experience. Okay, again, we talked earlier about that the bullies need to be dealt with too, and this is the same thing on Tier 3. When we have kids engaging in ongoing or serious bullying, we really have to work with them very intensely as well. So these are just kind of some tips. Again, this comes from Jody Blanco, who's the who's the consultant nationwide on bullying. And the first thing she says is that you never want to call out the bully in front of peers. This is because the more the teacher calls them out in front of peers, they almost become like a martyr. They're getting a lot of attention for it, and that's exactly what you want to avoid. You don't want the bully getting attention for their behavior from peers. So you should always talk to them in private, and it should be after the incident has taken place. She suggests really not mentioning the victims' names, and that's because there might be retaliation involved if you say, so-and-so told me, or I've heard that you're bullying so-and-so. So how she suggests that you do it is that you start the conversation with something positive so they're comfortable talking to you. You let them know, I think it's great that you've been participating so much in school. However, we have been getting some reports that you've been treating some of the other students in a not nice way. You've been calling names, or you've been hitting, or you've been pushing on the playground. And so, we need to talk about that and figure out a plan to keep that from happening. Another important thing to think about is the kind of discipline that you give. Now, one problem with traditional punishment, we suspend a student or we give them detention or various things like that, is that they get very angry and they get mad at the student who they were bullying because they think it's their fault that they got in trouble. And sometimes those forms of discipline also don't teach them how to be a better person. They don't teach them those values we were discussing earlier, like empathy and respect, which is what these students who are engaging in bullying behaviors need to learn. So another way to do it is to use what's called a compassionate form of discipline. And an example of this is, maybe you have a student that's been bullying another student, and so as a consequence, you say, you know what, we need to work on learning how to engage in nicer behaviors with other students. So what you're going to do is each day for 2 weeks, you're going to pick one student each day and you're going to do something nice for them. And I need you to keep a log every day of the name of the student who you did the kind act for. And then you need to write down what you did. And then I want you to write one paragraph about each day about how this made you feel when you did this kind act for them. And so at the end of the 2 weeks, you would collect the notebook, and then you would go over with them their experience, how it made them feel, and really use that as a teaching moment to teach them more about compassion, empathy, kindness. If they refuse to keep the log, then you may have to default to a traditional punishment. If you don't turn in your book, then you'll have another consequence. But in Jody's experience, this has been a much more positive way to deal with bullies and actually teaches them these skills rather than just giving them a consequence. There are times, however, when a traditional consequence may be necessary, depending on the severity of the bullying, the frequency, what's already been tried. So I think the point here is just that you have to kind of individualize what you're doing with the bully based off the overall picture, but be willing to kind of think out of the box as well. So kind of wrapping up here and putting it all together, All of these things that I've told you about on each tier, these aren't just things I've read in books or heard people say. These are actually things that I've done with my own children as well. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of how I've used some of these strategies and how I've seen them be effective. And I'm going to focus on my 12-year-old son because he's the one that has experienced and had bullying issues so far. So, the first thing that I've always done with both of my children is a lot of that preventative thing. We're always talking about bullying, talking about what bullying is. I've actually shown them, like that Dateline video that I've showed you, I've showed that to both of my children, and we've talked about what being a bystander means and how to stand up to bullies, and we've also talked about what bullying is and what to do if you're being bullied. So I've kind of given him that foundation. And one thing that I always do with him is those frequent check-ins, asking him how it's going. Now, because I know that he does have a lot of social issues, I ask him a lot of specific questions, like how's it going with your friends? Do you feel like you're having good relationships with your friends? Well, this last year, during one of these conversations, he told me that he thought he might be being bullied by this other student. And I started asking him some of those questions we talked about in Tier 2, trying to get some details from him. So I asked him, like, well, what's happening? And he said, well, he just keeps hitting me. And I said, okay. And I asked him some more questions. So when does he hit you? And he just said, I don't know, just kind of random times. Okay, and I asked him more questions. So what's his face look like when he's hitting you? Is he mad? Is he doing it in kind of a joking, silly kind of way? Maybe he's trying to be friends with you and he doesn't know how to make friends. And he said he didn't know. He said, I don't know. And so I kind of gave him an assignment. I said, well, I'll tell you what, next time this happens, I want you to pay attention to all of the details. So look at his face. Think about the situation that's happening when he's hitting you. And then I want you to come back and tell me what you find out. And then we can kind of go from there. So he went back to school. A couple days later, I asked him again about it. And he recounted an experience in the lunchroom where the kid had asked for something from his lunchbox. And when he said no, then this other student hit him. And, I asked him, well, what did you do when that happened? And he said, well, I didn't do anything. It just made me feel bad. I said, okay, well, let's kind of come up with a plan of action. Next time that he hits you, I want you to ask him to stop. And, we kind of role played how he would ask him to stop and the words he would say. And, I asked him if he thought he could do that, and he said he did think he could do that. So fast forward a few more days, he came home again. I asked him if there'd been any incident, and he said that there had been. And he said, Mom, I asked him to stop, and then he said, and I guess he used kind of a firm voice, he said, I need you to stop, and if you can't stop, we're just not going to be able to be friends because I don't like to be hit. And then he said, the other kid said, well, but I can't help it, it's because I have ADHD. And then my son said, well, ADHD doesn't make you hit people. And then he walked away. And the interesting thing was that after he said that, this kid has never hit him again. So with that particular situation, it kind of ended there because he was able to remedy the situation simply by firmly asking the other student to stop. And once the other student understood that, this was a serious issue, that he didn't like it, he was able to stop doing it. Now, kind of my backup plan in my head was that, if this behavior were to continue, I would have gone into more of those Tier 2 strategies. I'd kind of preliminarily talked with the school psychologist who said that she'd be happy to work with my son and with this other student if asking the other student to stop didn't work. So I kind of had that lined up if we needed it. I also thought that I would talk to some of the teachers of the classes where these two kids are both in the class and maybe ask her if she could kind of have these kids not sit by each other. So I kind of had some backup ideas on Tier 2 of ways that I could give more intensive interventions if that's what he needed. But luckily in this situation, he didn't end up needing that support. There was another time, however, this was back in 4th grade, where there was another student who actually took his backpack and threw it out the window of the bus when they were driving. And this student had been a student that he had had some previous kind of incidences with as well. So in that situation, I felt it was really important to immediately report it to the school. So I did write it down, and I brought it into his teacher. And the teacher was actually aware that the student had had some incidences, not only with my son, but with some other children as well. They did take my report very seriously, and they had given the documentation that I reported to the bus driver. And they informed me that they had a policy on the bus, and that if there were 3 incidences where a student violates bus rules, that they would no longer be able to attend the bus. And she actually encouraged me. She said, you know, if there's any other incidences, we really need it reported right away so we can have that documentation to give the consequences if we need to. You know, they also talked to that student's parents and let them know what was happening on the bus so that they could work with the student as well. And the student also started working with the school psychologist on appropriate social skills. So they not only responded to my request, but they were also able to help this other student. And my son actually didn't have any further issues with this student, but if he would have, I would have followed the same procedure of again reporting the incident so that the school could handle it. So, you know, overall, I think that these strategies really do work. There's going to be times when, you know, students need really customized things and there's not always an easy answer. And in that case, you work together with your school team to customize things to meet their needs. And that's a really nice thing about this MTSS model, is that we're no longer just assuming that one size fits all. We're understanding that different kids respond to different kids and that some kids need more intensive supports than others. So I hope that you guys were able to learn something from this presentation and at least think about some ideas of ways that you could deal with bullying if you encounter it with your child. I also want to let you know that at the Parent Center, we're always available to consult with you on your individual situation. So if you do have a bullying situation going on with your student with disabilities, whether they are the bully or whether they're being bullied, we'd certainly be happy to talk with you and kind of brainstorm with you some possible ideas of how to handle that or how to work with the school. And also on our website at www.utahparentscenter.org, we have a very big array of bullying resources. We have some resource information sheets that give you books and websites you can go to. We have some handouts especially for teens experiencing bullying and what they can do. We have information what to do if your child is the bullying. We've got the links for the PACER Center, which we've discussed throughout this presentation. We've got that student action plan. So there are quite a few resources on there, and we're always updating and developing new ones, so check back often. Again, if you have any questions for me or need further information about bullying, please give us a call, and we will be happy to help you with that. So with that, I thank you for your time and hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.